Hello class. Today we're going to talk about the competitive market and we're going to see how firms in the competitive market behave. So in this chapter we're going to look at what is a perfectly competitive market and we're going to see some examples of that. We're going to talk about what is marginal revenue and how is it related to total and average revenue. We're going to see how a competitive firm determines quantity and that maximizes profits. And we're going to see what might lead to a perfectly competitive firm to shut down in the short run and exit the market in the long run. So let's look at a scenario. Like supposing 3 years after graduating, you run your own business and you have to decide how much to produce, what price to charge, and how many workers you want to hire. Now, we would like to know, of course, when you're making this decision, what factors should affect these decisions. Well, one thing is your cost, which is we just studied in your preceding chapters. So your fixed costs, your variable cost, your marginal costs, all those costs. Also, how much competition do you face? So if you're the only person in that market, then maybe you might have some advantages. But if you're competing against a bunch of other people, then you might have to decide your marketing strategy a little differently. So we begin the chapter, or we begin this study of firms by studying the behavior of firms in a perfectly competitive market. So we're going to see, this is just from chapter 4. We talked about perfect competition a little bit in chapter 4. Well, some of the characteristics are there are many buyers and sellers. There's so many buyers and sellers that not one buyer or seller can affect the price. The goods offered for sale are largely the same. So basically, there's uniformity in the kind of products being sold. So mainly agriculture products have this condition. So basically, potatoes grown by Farmer John is pretty similar to potatoes grown by Farmer Jim. There isn't much of a difference in quality. Firms can freely enter or exit the market. So firms can actually enter or exit based on their ability to produce. So if they don't feel like they're making any money, they can easily exit the market. So because of conditions 1 and 2, we say that the buyer and the seller is a price taker. So basically they take the price as given. So they cannot affect the price, they basically take that price as given. So the revenue of a firm is total revenue, which is price times quantity. Average revenue is the revenue per unit. So if the total revenue is price times quantity and we divide it by quantity, we just get price. Marginal revenue, which is a new concept that we're going to learn in this chapter, it is basically the change in total revenue from selling one extra unit. So let's look at marginal revenue in this case. So if we are selling different quantities, so basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're charging the same price. So since we are in the perfectly competitive market, we cannot affect the price. So in this case, if we look at the formulas, okay, total revenue for the first unit, price times quantity, it's still 10. Or sorry, it's 0. Sorry about that. Average revenue, well, we can't divide a number by 0, so it's not available, or we cannot compute it. If quantity is 1 and price is 10, our total revenue is 10. Our average revenue is 10 divided by 1, which is still 10. If our quantity is 3 and price is 10, then our total revenue is 30. Average revenue, of course, if we divide total revenue by quantity, we all get 10. Now, marginal revenue, okay, change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. So let's look at this. When I'm moving from 10 to 20, let's use a pen. So the change in revenue here is 20, sorry, my handwriting again, minus 10, which comes out to be 10. And my change in quantity is, for that, it's 2 minus 1, which is just 1. So our marginal revenue is just 10 divided by 1, which is just 10. So if we look at that, and if we do it for every one of them, we find that the marginal revenue is also 10 for every unit. So if I sell one extra unit, since the price doesn't change, the extra unit brings in an amount equal to the price. So this is characteristics of perfectly competitive firms. Marginal revenue is always going to equal to price. So if there's a question about, okay, there's a firm where price equals marginal revenue, what kind of a firm it is definitely a perfectly competitive firm. Other firms that we will study will not have this quality. So MR equals to P is for a competitive firm. A competitive firm can keep on increasing output without affecting market price. So every unit increase in quantity will bring in a revenue that is equal to price. So marginal revenue is always equal to price. Now this is only true for perfectly competitive firms. When you look at profit maximization, so what quantity maximizes the firm's profit? To think about this answer, we have to think at the margin. And so if you're operating a perfectly competitive firm and you want to maximize profit, you have to think at the margin. So if you increase your quantity by one extra unit, you're producing one more unit, your revenue should rise by marginal revenue, MR, because that's the amount that the one extra unit is going to bring in to the firm. To produce that one extra unit, you need to spend an amount equal to MC, or marginal cost. If marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, so what the product, the extra unit brings into the firm is greater than how much it actually requires to produce it, then you got to keep on increasing quantity to raise profit. If on the other hand, if the marginal revenue, or what the product brings into the firm, is less than how much it actually costs to produce that output, then I need to reduce my quantity. I shouldn't produce as much, and that should raise profit. So in this case, let's look at an example. Let's say this is our cost schedule, so this is total cost. So total revenue minus total cost equals profit. Okay, so if that's the case, so of course this exercise should be kind of simple to do, because marginal revenue equals marginal, or how to calculate marginal cost, you should actually be able to find out. If you have problems figuring out what marginal cost is, then I would recommend go back to chapter 13 and review that section again. But in this case, we have marginal revenue and marginal cost. So if we look at profit, total profit, which is total revenue minus total cost, we find that profit is actually maximized at any quantity. If MR is greater than MC, profit can be increased if you keep on producing more, and we can see this from here. This shows MR is greater than MC, all these numbers, and if you compare it with profit, well, profit keeps on increasing. So you keep on producing more, and that will keep on increasing profit. The place where MR equals MC is the place where profit is maximized. And if you increase the quantity more than that, then actually, yes, you still earn profit. You still earn 5 units of profit, but you could have earned 5 units of profit if you just produced 2. So profit is actually, you're still earning profit, but it is maximized when you're producing 3 or 4 units of output. So you should probably stick to that amount. Since the firm cannot change marginal price, so the marginal revenue equals to price is a horizontal line, because it's a perfectly competitive firm. If I want to sell it at a lower price, well, why should I? Because all my competitors are selling it at that price, at P1. Any price I charge less than P1, I would be making less money. So I can't charge anything less than P1. If I charge anything more than P1, then all my buyers will go to my competitors, so they won't want to do business with me. If you look at the graph, at QA, marginal cost is less than marginal revenue. So an increase in quantity will raise profit because if you increase quantity, the same idea goes. That extra quantity brings in more money into the firm and it costs less money to produce it. If you're at QB, then marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue. Your cost is higher than the amount that it's bringing in. And so you need to reduce quantity to raise profit. At Q1, exactly Q1, marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So changing the quantity would lower profit. So if you think about it, it's like an upside down U-shaped curve, and you're at the top at Q1. Any other quantity that you're producing will raise or will lower your profit level. So Q1 is the point that you should look for. If you're a perfectly competitive firm and you want to maximize profits, then Q1 is the point. So this is true for not only for a perfectly competitive firm, but for most firms operating. If you want to maximize your profit, you have to produce at a point where MR equals MC. Supposing price rises to P2, what happens? Supposing because there's an increase in demand, so there's more buyers in the market and they want to buy more, so price rises to P2. Now the profit maximizing quantity rises to Q2. So the marginal cost curve then determines the firm's quantity at any price, because you can have any price and the firm, if they can produce more, they can produce it at any quantity corresponding to that price. Therefore, the marginal cost curve is the firm's supply curve. This is the individual firm's supply curve. There is no really demand curve for the individual firm. The firm just produces at, so it notices, all right, the price is P1. Excuse me, the price is P1, so I should produce Q1 units. Or the price is P2, so I should produce Q2 units. Now let's look at shutdown and exit. Shutdown is a short-run decision. It's a decision where you don't produce anything because of market conditions. So you basically close your business for 2 to 3 months because of a lack of sales. Exit is basically a decision to completely leave the market permanently. So if you've seen the movie like The Shining, that was a shutdown decision where the hotel owners just shut down the hotel for a couple of months out of the year because there was just no business. It was such a remote location that no one would go there. And so they hired Jack Nicholson and his crazy family, and they started seeing crazy stuff. But in shutdown, this happens in a lot of cases, especially in like tourist towns and stuff. During lean season, the hotels just shut down for a couple of months because there isn't enough demand. But exit is when they actually close the business altogether and just leave the business. There's a key difference. Even if you shut down in short run, you still have to pay fixed costs because you still have to pay for the upkeep of the property or your business. Okay, you still have to pay rent. You still have to pay probably your cable bill. Other variable costs are zero, so let's say your utilities bill is zero, your input prices are zero, but if you actually exit in the long run, then you have no cost. You have zero costs. So what is a firm's short-run decision? So if you want to shut down, total loss of revenue is total revenue, which is price times quantity. So you're not making any sales, so you're losing that amount. Benefit of shutting down? Well, you don't pay the variable costs. VC is variable costs. You still have to pay the fixed costs, but you don't have to pay the variable cost. So you should shut down if total revenue is less than variable cost. If your amount that you're bringing in can't cover all your variable costs, then you should shut down, at least in the short run. So if you divide both sides by quantity, it's just an algebraic identity. If you divide one side by quantity, you have to divide the other side by quantity too. Total revenue divided by quantity is price. variable cost divided by quantity is average variable cost. So you should shut down if price is less than average variable cost. And that's the basic rule, is that if you have average variable cost, that's if the price, the marginal revenue does not cover all the average variable cost, then you should shut down in the long run, or in the short run. Now, the average variable cost is a U-shaped curve. The average total cost, which is average fixed cost plus average variable cost, is right above the average variable cost. This difference is average fixed cost. Okay, so if we looked at the derivation of these curves last chapter, but we didn't really talk about the shape of the curves. The curves are usually U-shaped. Average total cost is a U-shaped curve, average variable cost is a U-shaped curve. At first, if you're producing smaller amounts and you increase your quantity, you can actually produce more at a lower price. So your cost keeps on going down. So on an average, your cost keeps on going down, or your cost per units keeps on going down. But after a while, everything, like if you still want to increase your costs or your production, then people get into their way, their workers get into their way, there isn't enough raw materials to supply and to produce the final output, so your cost then starts going up. So that makes your average cost or cost per unit to go up. That's one short way of explaining why the curves are U-shaped. So if the price is greater than average variable cost, then you should keep on producing. If the price is less than average variable cost, then the firm should shut down. So the supply curve is basically the red line. So any price you get that's below average variable cost, the firm should not produce anything. If the price is above average variable cost but below average total cost, then at least you're covering some of your overhead. So you're covering some of your fixed costs, some part of your rent and other fixed costs, in addition to covering your variable costs, so the wages of your workers, the utility bills, and all those things. If your price is above average total cost, then you're actually good. You're making money. Now here we come to the idea of irrelevance of sunk cost. Sunk cost is a cost that has already been committed and cannot be recovered. So sunk cost should be irrelevant to your decision. So for example, let's say when you open a business, you need to pay for the permits. So you need to go to the city government and pay some amount to get a business permit or a business license. That you had to pay when you opened your business. When you're thinking about shutting down or closing your business 2 years later, that cost should not be taken into account because that has already been taken care of. You cannot do later. That part, it's not part of your cost. So, or that cost, let's say, to open a business, the amount that you had to spend, you can't recover that. That's gone. So that's called a sunk cost. So fixed cost is a kind of sunk cost. You have to pay fixed costs whether you produce or shut down. It must be paid. So for example, if you enter into a contract to rent your shop for 2 years, no matter how much you produce, or if you produce 0 units or 1,000,000 units, you still have to pay that amount for at least 2 years. So in this case, fixed cost is a sunk cost. So fixed cost should not matter in the decision to shut down. So if you want to temporarily shut down for 2 to 3 months, you have to pay that amount anyway. So if you're not making any money that is covering your variable cost, if the price is less than average variable cost, you should definitely shut down. When do you exit? When let's say, if you exit the market, your revenue loss is total revenue, which is price times quantity. You save total cost, so you don't have to pay fixed cost anymore or variable cost. Well, fixed cost is 0 in the long run because all costs become variable. After 2 years, your lease expires, so you have the option if you want to renew your lease or not. So in that case, the firm exits when total revenue is less than total cost. So in the short run, firms can get away with earning losses for a few years. But if you keep on earning losses year after year after year, then the firm cannot operate and the firm has to exit. So in this case, if in the short run, if you can cover your average variable cost, then you should still be in business. But if that keeps on happening, even in the long run, even 10 years from down the road, then you should exit the market. So one classic example is Amazon. When Amazon.com first came in, it was earning losses. So for first 5, 6 years, it didn't earn any profit, but it was still in business because it felt like in the future it's going to earn this, it's going to earn a lot of money. And so in the long run, it actually started earning profits, and so it decided not to exit the market. Now, if we divide both sides by Q and we write the firm's decision rule, of course, total cost divided by quantity is average total cost, total revenue divided by quantity is price. So in the long run, that is in 5 years, 10 years from now, the firm should exit if price is less than average total cost. When should firms decide to enter the market? If there is any chance to earn profit, since there is free entry and exit, any firm, anybody can enter the market if there is any chance of making profit. Suppose you see that people are making a lot of money baking cakes and you think you're a great baker, so you will start your business. You don't need to do much to start baking. All you need is an oven and some supplies and some, and some advertising. So it's really quick to do that. And if you feel that you can earn a lot of profit, then it's very easy to enter the market. Now, if we divide both sides by Q to express the firm's entry decision, we get price is greater than average total cost. So a firm will always enter the market. There will always be entry into the market if price is greater than average total cost. So you will have, if you're already in the market, you'll have more competitors entering the market if price is greater than average total cost. If price is less than average total cost in the long run, then firms will leave the market. And so there's the equilibrium is when average total cost equals price. Now LR, it means, this word means long run. L, long run. So long run average total cost. RU. And we have our marginal cost. So that's what the firm's supply curve looks like in the long run. So 10 years down the road. Now let's look at this. Let's see how can we identify a firm's profit. So we want to determine the firm's total profit. We want to determine the area of the graph that represents this profit. Okay. So we have our marginal revenue, we have our marginal cost, we have our average total cost. Okay. Now, the point where profit is maximized is always MR equals MC. So step one is we have to figure out the point where MR equals MC. So at what quantity does this happen? And we found out that at 50 units, we have MR equals to MC. This is the price that they're charging. Okay, so at Q equals 50, if profit is supposed to be maximized, it's going to be at quantity equals 50. Okay, now how much does it cost to produce on an average each unit? So after we do that, we find out what is the average total cost. So the average total cost, that is, this is how much, $6 is what it costs for me to produce 1 unit on an average. So the cost per unit is $6. So the profit per unit is, well, it brings in $10. It cost me $6 to make it, so it's $4 of profit per unit. So total profit is that area that's colored. It's that rectangle. So total profit is price minus ATC times quantity. So total quantity is 50. So So each quantity brings in $4 into the firm. There's 50 quantity and 50 units being bought and sold, so total quantity is 200. What about loss? Okay, so if there's loss, then the price here first, we find out what's the MR, at what point does MR equal MC? Well, MR equals MC at quantity equals 30. So at that point, what is the cost per unit of production? It's 5. So if we look at that, then there's a loss being earned. The loss is $2. So if we plug it in there, total loss comes to be $60 because we're still selling 30 units. Each unit is earning a loss of $2. So the total loss is 60. Or we can also write profit, FIT equals negative 60. They're both okay. If you say loss is 60, it means profit is negative 60. Now let's look at market supply. We make some assumptions. All firms and potential entrants, they have identical costs. So basically it's a stretch, but it just makes things a little simpler to understand. Let's say that they're hiring the same worker. All the workers in that industry are employed at, let's say, $10 an hour. The factory, the floor space all has similar rent structure and all those things. And as more firms enter the market, the firm's cost does not change. And the number of firms in the market is fixed in the short run due to fixed costs and variable because of entry and exit. So these are some assumptions that we make. Now, in the long run, of course, the number of firms can change because of entry and exit, because some firms might enter the market, some firms might exit because they are not being able to sustain in the market. If existing firms earn positive economic profit, then of course new firms will enter the market because I can see that this industry is very profitable. They're making a lot of money. It doesn't take much work to enter the market, so I can enter the market. When new firms enter the market, of course, as we saw in chapter 4, an increase in the number of sellers increases supply. And so the supply curve will shift to the right. SR means short run. So the short run market supply curve will shift to the right. When supply shifts to the right, you can draw it. If demand stays the same, this is market demand, then price falls, reducing profits and slowing entry. If the existing firms incur losses, and if they keep on incurring losses, then some firms will exit. If there's a reduction in the number of firms, then supply will decrease. If supply falls, price will go up if demand stays the same. And so, if price rises, it can reduce the losses of the existing firms. So in the long run, because of profit entry and exit, because of entry and exit due to profit, if there is profit, there will be entry. If there is losses, there will be exit. Eventually, the firms in the industry will earn zero economic profit. Zero economic profit occurs when price equals average total cost. So you're bringing in, when you sell an extra unit, you're bringing in an amount equal to P. And to produce that P, it costs on an average an amount equals to ATC. Since firm produces where price equals marginal revenue equals marginal cost at profit maximization point, so the zero profit condition says price equals marginal cost equals average total cost. And so eventually in the long run, because you are actually, you know your industry, if you survived it, if it didn't kill you, it made you stronger, you survived it, you can actually produce the output in the most efficient way possible, so you can actually produce it at the lowest average total cost. So your marginal cost actually passes through the point where your average total cost is the minimum. So in the long run, your price is also at the point where average total cost is minimum. And this only happens in perfect competition. So in perfect competition, we have a lot of things going on here. Price equals marginal revenue. At the profit maximizing point, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. In the long run, price also equals to the minimum of average total cost. Why do firms stay in business if profit is zero? Well, because if you recall from the cost chapter, economic profit is revenue minus all the cost. And they also include implicit cost, which is the opportunity cost of the owner's time. In a zero profit condition, firms earn enough to cover these costs. So they earn enough to actually cover the cost of the owner's time and money. You could still have accounting profit that is positive. Accounting profit is what? Total revenue minus explicit cost. Economic profit is zero, meaning total revenue minus the explicit and implicit cost equals zero. So you can actually have positive accounting profit, but your economic profit will be equal to zero because the amount you're earning as a profit, as accounting profit, that's enough to cover the cost of the owner's time and money that the owner invested into the business. So here we have the efficiency of a competitive market. Profit maximization is where MR equals MC. In perfect competition, price equals marginal revenue, as we just saw. So in a competitive equilibrium, price equals marginal cost if we are producing at the profit maximizing point. If you recall from the last chapter, marginal cost is the cost of producing the last unit. Price is the value to buyers of that last unit. So if the marginal cost is the cost of producing the last unit and price is what the people who are buying that product values it at, then you can show, and it requires some math, but you can show that the competitive equilibrium is the most efficient and it makes both the buyer and the seller happy. If the buyers are paying exactly what they value the product to be and the seller cost is exactly that amount to produce it, then the market is not wasting any resources. In the next chapter, we're going to see, which is monopoly, we will see that this does not hold, and so there can be some differences, and so it can cause certain problems.